when Jamie and Riley took the late-night shift at Wendy's, they thought it would be an easy paycheck. But by midnight, the empty restaurant wasn't empty anymore, and something with red hair and a frozen smile was watching them, waiting. I had never worked a night shift at Wendy's before, and as I walked through the parking lot, I couldn't help feeling a strange mix of excitement and unease. The lot was empty except for one car parked near the far end, its headlights off, giving it a ghostly presence in the dim glow of the street lamps. The air smelled faintly of rain, but beneath that there was something else, a metallic temp that made the back of my throat tighten. I shook my head, telling myself it was nothing, just the city air mixing with the smell of the fryers. When I unlocked the doors and stepped inside, the fluorescent lights flickered once and then hummed steadily. The store looked clean, almost sterile, but quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Usually, even at night, there was the low murmur of cars passing by, or the faint sound of delivery trucks somewhere down the road. Tonight, there was nothing, just the hum of the freezers and the distant whir of the soda machines. I ran my fingers over the counter, checking for dust, trying to ground myself in the familiar routine of wiping and restocking. I started my shift by cleaning and organizing the kitchen, the smell of fried food mixed with the sharp Thames of cleaning chemicals. But under that, there was something else, subtle and almost imperceptibly a hint of decay, like rotten meat hidden beneath something sweet. I told myself it was my imagination. Night shifts played tricks on your senses. An hour passed slowly, each beep of the register and sizzle from the fryers echoing far too loudly in the emptiness. Then I thought I saw something move out of the corner of my eye, near the hallway leading to the storage room. I froze, my heart skipping a beat, but when I turned fully, the hallway was empty, just shadows stretching across the tile floor, bending unnaturally. I laughed nervously at myself, but the laugh sounded hollow, swallowed by the silence. I tried to focus on the routine, checking the soda machines, wiping counters, restocking napkins, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. It was like invisible eyes tracing my every movement, waiting. I went to the bathroom to splash water on my face, trying to shake off the creeping sense of dread. When I looked in the mirror, I froze. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure behind me, pale and blurry, standing just at the edge of the reflection. My heart raced as I spun around. Nothing, just the empty bathroom. I told myself I was imagining things, but when I returned to the counter, my stomach dropped. On the ketchup stand sat a small Wendy doll. Its face was pale, with painted freckles and bright red hair, but the glassy eyes seemed wrong, too wide, too dark, as if they were staring straight through me. I hadn't seen it before. I hadn't touched it. My fingers itched to push it off, to throw it away, but a shiver ran down my spine. It felt alive. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just a doll someone had left. But as I moved across the floor to restock the condiments, I caught the faintest glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. The doll seemed closer. No, not closer. Tilted differently, facing me more directly than before. My breathing quickened, shallow and fast. I stepped back, almost tripping over a chair, my heart hammering in my chest. I moved to the back of the store, hoping to clear my head in the small office, but the shadows seemed to stretch toward me, lingering in every corner. The metallic temps of decay grew stronger, pressing at my senses, making me dizzy. Every sound, the flick of the fluorescent light, the hum of the deep fryer, the distant beep of the soda machine sounded amplified, echoing off the walls like it was mocking me. I finally sat behind the counter, trying to focus on the clock. Minutes crawled past. That's when I thought I heard it, a soft giggle, faint and quick, like the sound of tiny teeth clacking together. I whipped around. Empty store. My eyes darted to the ketchup stand. The doll sat there, motionless again, its painted eyes fixed on me. But now, I could swear I saw the corner of its mouth twitch. A tiny, slow, deliberate movement that made my stomach twist. I backed away, shaking, every instinct screaming at me to leave. But the doors were locked, and I was alone. The doll's smile seemed wider somehow, more deliberate, as if it were pleased. I wanted to throw it away, burn it, do anything, but the thought of touching it made my skin crawl. My first night at Wendy's ended with me sitting rigidly behind the counter, eyes fixed on that small, silent figure, feeling its gaze pierce into my mind. Even after I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that it had moved while I wasn't looking. At home, I dreamed of pale faces and giggles, of red hair floating in the darkness, and I woke with the same cold, metallic smell lingering in my room, as though it had followed me. Something was in the store, waiting, watching, and I knew terrifyingly that it wouldn't let me rest. I returned to Wendy's the next night, hoping desperately that last night had been a fluke, just my imagination running wild. The store looked normal at first, clean and bright under the fluorescent lights. But the moment I stepped inside, a heavy feeling settled over me, like the air itself was thicker than it should be. The metallic temps I had smelled before were stronger now, sharp and lingering in my nostrils. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my tasks, wiping counters, and restocking the napkins. That's when I noticed the boxes. They were stacked neatly in the corner near the walk-in freezer. Boxes I hadn't seen before and that I was certain hadn't been delivered. Each one had a sticker of Wendy's face smiling, but there was something off about her eyes, darker, hollow, staring at me with an intensity that made my stomach turn. I hesitated, hands trembling slightly, then decided to open one. Inside, my heart sank. It wasn't food. It wasn't even supplies. It was dolls, teeny Wendy dolls, all dismembered in ways that made my stomach lurch. Their little arms and legs were bent at odd angles, their painted smiles smeared with red, looking almost like blood. I wanted to scream, to throw them all away, but my voice caught in my throat. Something about them felt alive, as though they were aware of me, as though they had been waiting for me to see them. I tried to convince myself that it was just some weird prank, that someone had to be messing with me. But then I saw movement in the corner of the security monitor. I froze. At first I thought it was a glitch. The feed flickered, and then a shadow appeared, low to the ground, dragging one of the tiny dolls across the floor of the hallway behind the counter. My stomach knotted. I leaned closer to the monitor. When I looked up again, the shadow was gone, as if it had never been there. The store suddenly felt alive, each sound amplified in the emptiness. The hum of the deep fryer became a low growl. The flicker of the soda machine lights looked like a warning. I tried to focus on cleaning, but every surface, every corner of the store seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. I thought I caught a glimpse of movement in the hallway again, but when I turned, nothing was there. I decided to check the freezer, thinking maybe it had been a draft or a reflection that had scared me. But the moment I opened the door, my stomach dropped. Among the frozen boxes, standing upright on a shelf, was a Wendy doll. Its face was the same as the ones in the boxes, but its eyes were different. They were darker, glossy, reflecting the light in a way that made them seem almost human. Its smile looked wider, stretching unnaturally across its face. I slammed the door shut, stepping back as my heart pounded in my chest. I moved toward the counter, trying to rationalize what I had seen. Maybe I was exhausted, imagining things. Maybe it was just the stress of the late shifts. But the metallic smell was stronger now, filling the air, and I could swear I heard faint giggles, almost like they were coming from inside the walls. I told myself it was the store's acoustics playing tricks on me. Then, without warning, a box tipped over on its own, spilling more dolls across the floor. They didn't land normally. Their limbs bent in impossible ways, faces tilted up to stare at me with those same hollow, unnerving eyes. My throat tightened. I stepped back, almost tripping over a fallen doll. The giggles grew louder, now coming from all around me, bouncing off the walls and ceiling. I tried to leave, but my hands shook so violently that I couldn't even grab my keys properly. It was as if the store itself was holding me there, forcing me to witness what I couldn't explain. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward me, and for a moment, I thought I saw them move, teeny shapes crawling toward me, limbs bending in ways no human body could. By the time I finally gathered enough courage to step toward the exit, I realized something even more terrifying. The dolls weren't just toys. Each one had a faint pulse, almost imperceptible, but it was there, alive, breathing, waiting. I froze in place, staring at the dolls scattered across the floor. One of them slowly turned its head toward me. Its painted lips moved slightly, forming words I couldn't hear, whispering directly into my mind. I stumbled back, my vision swimming. My hands trembled as I backed into a corner, too terrified to move, too aware that whatever this was, it was no longer just in the store. It had been waiting for me, and now, I knew, it was aware of me. The dolls blinked. They were alive, and one of them smiled in a way that I would never forget. By the third night I was terrified to return, but something deep inside me compelled me to go back. It was like a magnetic pull, dragging me toward the store, toward whatever had been waiting for me. The streets were quiet when I arrived, almost too quiet, the air heavy and still. I hesitated outside the door, feeling a chill crawl up my spine, but I had no choice. I needed to understand what was happening, or at least convince myself it wasn't real. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt different, thicker somehow, almost suffocating. The metallic smell was stronger than ever, a sharp, biting temp that made my head spin. I tried to focus on my routine, wiping counters, checking the soda machines, stocking napkins, but my mind kept drifting back to the dolls. They were everywhere, scattered across the floor, stacked neatly in corners, and worst of all, the one I had seen in the freezer. I could feel it watching me, waiting. Then I heard it. Faint at first, almost imperceptibly soft, giggling voice, quick and high-pitched. I froze, every nerve in my body screaming at me. It came again, closer this time, echoing from the vents above, or maybe the hallways. My eyes darted around, trying to find the source, but there was nothing, just the store, empty and quiet. And yet I knew the voice was real. It was calling me, teasing me, mocking me. I moved toward the counter, my hands shaking, and noticed something I hadn't before. Objects were shifting when I wasn't looking. Soda cups stacked themselves in uneven spirals, ketchup packets lined up like tiny soldiers, all facing me. Shadows flickered across the walls, and every time I turned, I thought they had moved closer. My heart pounded in my chest. The feeling of being watched was no longer subtle, it was suffocating, pressing in from all sides. I tried to calm myself by focusing on cleaning the floors, but as I leaned over to pick up a napkin, I caught my reflection in the drive-through window. I froze. Something was behind me, tall and shadowed, a dark silhouette blending into the darkness of the empty store. It had no distinct features, but its presence was palpable, heavy, suffocating. My pulse raced, I blinked, and it was gone, but the unease lingered, crawling along my skin like icy fingers. Then the giggling began again, but this time, it changed. It mimicked me repeating the thoughts in my head before I could even speak them. I froze, staring at the counter. One of the dolls from the boxes slowly turned its head toward me. Its eyes, glossy and black, seemed to follow my every movement. Its tiny painted lips moved slightly, whispering words I couldn't hear aloud but felt inside my mind. "Why are you here? Why are you still here?" I stumbled backward, my hands shaking so violently I dropped the rag I had been using. The dolls on the floor seemed to twitch and writhe, their limbs bending in impossible ways. Shadows stretched across the walls, forming shapes that shouldn't exist. Shapes that seemed to slither and crawl, watching me, judging me. I pressed myself against the counter, trying to make myself small, to disappear. The freezer door creaked open slowly, as if pushed by unseen hands. I hadn't touched it, hadn't even moved near it, but there it was, again the doll from before, standing upright on the shelf, staring at me with those hollow, unnerving eyes. Its painted smile stretched wider, impossibly wide, as though it were growing, expanding across its tiny face. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. I wanted to leave, but the thought of moving, of turning my back on them, terrified me. I felt as though the dolls had claimed the store, claimed me. The voice whispered again, echoing inside my mind. "You can't leave, you never leave." I could feel it pressing closer, as if the walls themselves were closing in, the shadows crawling along the tile floor, toward me. By 3 a.m., exhaustion and fear had combined into a strange numbness. My mind was desperate for logic, for reason, but the store offered none. The metallic smell was now overpowering, filling my lungs, making each breath painful. I backed toward the hallway that led to the storage room, hoping to find anything that would explain this nightmare. But when I reached it, I realized the walls were lined with dolls, hundreds of them, staring at me, each with that same unnatural, knowing gaze. And then I saw it, a shadow, taller than the others, rising slowly from the corner, its shape twisting and stretching in the dim light. Its grin was unmistakable. It wasn't just a doll anymore. It was something alive, something that had been waiting for me all along. My chest tightened. I realized, with a sickening clarity, that I wasn't alone, and I never would be. The store wasn't just haunted, it was hungry. By the fourth night, I didn't want to go back, but I had no choice. The nightmares had followed me into the daylight, and even the faintest reminder of Wendy's made my skin crawl. I arrived early, trying to steel myself. But the parking lot was empty in a way that felt unnatural, the silence pressing down like a weight. When I opened the door and stepped inside, the fluorescent lights flickered and buzzed, casting uneven shadows across the walls. The metallic smell was stronger than ever, curling in my nostrils, thick and choking. I tried to start my shift normally, wiping counters, checking the soda machines, and organizing the storage room. But I noticed small changes immediately. The boxes of dolls were no longer stacked neatly in the corner. Instead, they were scattered across the floor, limbs twisted, faces staring up at me with their hollow, black eyes. It was impossible they had been stacked when I left the night before. I couldn't explain it. The sense of being watched was suffocating, shadows crawling along the floor and walls like they had life of their own. I tried to ignore it, to focus on work, but the lights went out completely without warning. The hum of the deep fryer stopped, leaving a deafening silence. My phone had no signal. I was completely cut off. Panic started to rise in my chest as I realized the store had transformed, or perhaps revealed itself. It wasn't just empty, it was alive, aware of me, and it didn't want me to leave. I moved cautiously, hands brushing against counters, trying to follow the faint glow of the exit signs, but every time I turned, the shadows seemed to shift, forming shapes that shouldn't exist. Shapes that reached out, curling and twisting toward me. The giggling began again, but this time it was everywhere, bouncing off the walls, coming from vents, corners, and even the freezer. It wasn't playful anymore, it was cruel, threatening, intent on breaking me. Then I saw them, the dolls, hundreds of them, crawling across the floor, their tiny limbs bending in unnatural angles. Their painted smiles were wider than I remembered, almost stretching across their small faces, and their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. I stumbled back, my chest tight, trying to scream, but no sound came out. My fear was so intense that I felt paralyzed, frozen in place as the dolls moved closer. The shadow appeared then, stretching and growing in the darkness. It wasn't human, and yet it had a grin that looked exactly like Wendy's. Its presence pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating, as if the store itself had taken form in that dark shape. The dolls around it seemed to respond, moving faster, their giggles blending into one long high-pitched wail. I backed into the freezer, hoping to barricade myself, but the door slammed shut behind me, before I could even reach it. Inside, I could see them all stacked on shelves, lying in piles, crawling along the walls. And then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The dolls' eyes were blinking, slow and deliberate. They weren't dolls anymore, they were alive. Their tiny faces twisting into expressions of fear and pain, reflecting my own terror back at me. The shadow loomed closer, and I could feel its grin widen, stretching impossibly across a face that should not have been capable of such malice. I pressed myself against the freezer wall, my hands trembling uncontrollably. The metallic smell filled my lungs, burning, choking me, and the wails of the dolls grew louder, echoing in my mind. I realized, in a sickening clarity, that the store wasn't just haunted, it was sentient, and it had trapped me inside its nightmare. Every surface, every shadow, every tiny whisper in the vents was aware of me, and it was hungry for my fear. I couldn't move, I couldn't scream. I could only watch as the dolls crawled closer, their tiny black eyes following every twitch of my fingers, every shiver of my body. The shadow leaned forward, its grin stretching impossibly wide, and I felt a cold, unnatural pressure on my chest, as if it wanted to push me into the darkness. The giggling and whispering combined into a single, unbearable sound, filling every corner of the freezer, crawling under my skin, burrowing into my bones, and then I understood. Whatever lived here had been waiting, not just for me, but for the fear it could feed on. The dolls weren't just watching, they were part of it. Extensions of the shadow, growing more alive with each terrified heartbeat. My mind reeled as I realized I had no escape. The store had claimed me, and it wasn't finished. It wanted more, my terror, my obedience, my soul. As I pressed myself into the corner, staring at the glowing eyes and twisted smiles, I knew the truth. I wasn't leaving this store the way I came in. And somewhere deep inside I felt a terrifying certainty that even if I survived, the store and whatever it was would follow me, waiting for the night when I returned, ready to finish what it had begun. I never wanted to go back to Wendy's after that fourth night, but the pull was irresistible. Even during the day, shadows seemed to follow me, and the nightmares had grown worse. Faces in the dark, tiny giggles echoing in my ears, whispers I couldn't escape. Something had attached itself to me, and I knew it wouldn't let me rest until I returned. When I arrived that night, the parking lot was empty, and the air was unnaturally still. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, the fluorescent lights flickering weakly, barely illuminating the store. The metallic smell was stronger than ever, almost suffocating, curling around me like smoke. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I was trapped, drawn forward by something I couldn't resist. The store looked as if no one had been there in years, though I knew the events of the previous nights had been real. Shadows twisted unnaturally across the walls, stretching and moving as if they were alive. Every surface seemed to pulse with a presence, watching, waiting. And then I noticed them, the dolls. They were everywhere, hundreds of them. Their limbs bent at impossible angles, their faces twisted into grotesque smiles, their eyes black and moving, blinking as though breathing. I stepped carefully, trying to avoid tripping over them, but the floor seemed alive, shifting slightly under my feet. The whispers began, soft at first, then growing louder, circling my head, echoing through my skull. "You can't leave, you never leave." The words weren't just sounds, they were inside me, pressing into my mind, filling every corner with dread. I tried to move toward the exit, but the doors were gone, or perhaps they had never been there. The store had changed again, folding in on itself, shadows creating walls and corridors that shouldn't exist. Every turn I took led me deeper inside, and the whispers followed, growing more urgent, more insistent. The dolls crawled closer, their tiny limbs skittering across the floor, climbing shelves, stacking themselves into towers that leaned toward me like hungry predators. I stumbled into the freezer, hoping to find some space, some barrier, some refuge. But when I opened the door, the sight made me want to vomit. Every shelf was packed with dolls, each one alive, their tiny painted lips moving as they whispered my name. Their eyes glimmered in the dim light, and I realized with a chill that some of them weren't even small anymore. They had grown, stretching, twisting, taking on shapes that were almost human, almost like me. My own reflection stared back at me from their glossy eyes, terrified and pleading. Then I felt it behind me, the shadow, taller than anything natural, bending and stretching in impossible ways. Its grin was wide, impossibly wide, the exact replica of Wendy's smiling face. It leaned closer, and I could feel the pressure of its presence pressing into my chest. My breath caught. I wanted to scream, but my voice had left me. I could only watch, paralyzed, as it reached out, and I realized there was no escape. I forced my legs to move, running blindly through the store, weaving past the crawling dolls, the shifting shadows, the whispering voices that followed every step. And then, in a moment I can't fully describe, I was outside again. The parking lot was empty, quiet, normal, or at least it seemed normal. Relief surged through me. I thought I had escaped. But then I saw it. A small doll lying in the gravel, staring up at me. Its face was pale, its hair red and glossy. But its eyes were different. They were deep, black, and moving, tracking me, alive. I picked it up, trembling, and then it whispered, not aloud, but inside my mind, "Next time, you stay forever." I ran. I didn't stop until my lungs burned and my legs ached. But even now, I know it followed me, somewhere unseen, attached to me, waiting for the night when I would return. That night, as I lay in my bed, I noticed something horrifying in the reflection of my window. My own face was smiling, small freckles, red hair, and wide, hollow eyes that weren't mine. And beneath it, in the corner of the glass, the tiny doll sat, staring, grinning, whispering, promising that the store had not let me go. I don't know how much time passed after that, because sleep never came. Every creak of the house, every shadow cast by the streetlight, made my heart hammer. I knew one day I would have to return, or it would come for me in ways I could never escape. And even now, I can feel it, waiting, patient, stretching its shadows through my mind, leaving me with a single terrifying truth: Wendy's never forgets.